Swivl Sessions, interviews with field service entrepreneurs. Get insights and strategies from those who took the leap and risked it all to start their own home service companies. Really good talk today with Trevor Murphy from Murphy's Renovations. Jeremy, what do you got?
Trevor's focused. This guy has been in business for about 6 years, and he went out last year in order to make more money and get bigger projects. He went out, spent the time, and got his GC license, which is not easy to do, especially when you're running a small business. And also, he just kind of threw in there, he's finishing his finance degree. So really shows this guy's determination and grit running a business.
The running theme in these podcasts is good business owners know where they're going. They know that direction. And that's one of the things that impressed me about Trevor. He knows where he's going. He appreciates the team he has helping him get there. And best of all, he understands the value of his name and having his name attached to the work that he does. I put a lot of stake in that. So Trevor Murphy, Murphy's Renovations. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Swivl Sessions, where we dive into the world of field service entrepreneurship. Now, before we get into today's interview, let's introduce the host you'll be hearing from. First, we have Jeremy Edgar. Edgar is our self-proclaimed work-from-home trailblazer. In reality, he spends half his day doing laundry and sneaking off to pick up his kids. Somehow, between folding towels and carpool line, he still manages to call it work. But despite his creative scheduling, Edgar brings just enough sales magic to keep our team on track, most days at least. Edgar.
Thanks for those kind words, Rob. Hey, Trevor, I'd like to introduce Rob, the legend of the blue shirt and the salad bowl, a man whose hobbies include poorly drumming on his electronic drum kit and sneaking in afternoon naps like a seasoned pro. Once lost in France on a hike, Rob is our go-to operations expert who cheats on Wordle but can't seem to win at choosing decent shoes. He's the office enigma, equal parts chaos and calm, who dreams big but somehow always wakes up at his desk. That's Rob.
And for the record, I do not cheat on Wordle. I cheat on the mini New York Times crossword. Anyway. All right. Well, today we're excited to introduce Trevor Murphy, the founder and owner of Murphy's Renovations, a highly regarded home modeling and renovation company based in Tallahassee, Florida. They offer a wide range of services and can tackle just about any home project you can think of. We are really looking forward to hearing about his journey through entrepreneurship. So, Trevor, welcome to Swivl Sessions. It's great to have you here. How are things over there in Tallahassee?
Trevor. Everything's great. Just warming up. The sun's out. It's a beautiful day. Lots of work going on, so everything's good.
That sounds good. Hey, Trevor, before we get really going with this, tell us about your background. This is a good chance for you to talk about why you're doing what you do and what you did before.
Yes, so I've been in construction basically my whole life. I got started when I was around 15, 35 now. Over the years, I've had various businesses doing the different trades, always with business partners. And over time, I don't know, about 6 years ago, I thought I was getting tired of construction, and I thought I was going to go to college and go work finance. And I got really close to that degree and just decided to slow that down and just get back into construction. And that's when I started the business, Murphy's Renovations, with no business partners essentially, and decided to get my contractor's license and just go from there. At this point, we're just putting it all together, all the stuff from all the different trades over the years, and putting together everything that I've learned over the years and all the connections and the different subcontractors we have, and just really trying to make something out of it.
Okay, hey, Trevor, tell me about that contractor's license. What I understand, it is a doozy down in Florida, right? I mean, I've heard of people going in with stacks of books.
It's there's a pile of books, yes, sir. So I'm a Florida certified building contractor, which means I can have unlimited structural abilities up to 3 stories. I can't go past 3 stories with that. And you got to hold that license for 4 years, and then you can move to the GC license, general contractor, and then you can do skyscrapers, which I think might be really cool one day.
Wow.
It's definitely on the radar. Who knows? It is a it is an interesting test. There's a lot of information. Over the years, I hadn't worked with a ton of general contractors. You do need experience requirements, and luckily I had enough to cover all of that. But majority of my time has been just learning. And so it was interesting going from being in the field to, you kind of know. You kind of know a lot of the rules, regulations, the the codes. You hear and you learn it through passing, but it was really good to go through and really learn it. And the test isn't so much about being able to absorb all the information. It's more so being able to find it when you need it and knowing
Right.
what you need to look for when it's time. And so it's fun. It was fun process, just going from on the field, out in the field, to just, back to the basics, essentially, all the way down to, the pen and paper with it, and really relearning it all from a different perspective.
Yeah. And now that you have that contractor's license, then there's a bit of weight to it, right? So if you're
Yeah,
using your license, you're responsible for what's
absolutely.
going on and making it apply.
Absolutely.
Um,
And, that's part of not, my significant other, Laura, she's a very strong part in the business, and I'm definitely a business partner. But that's, other than that, that's why I don't have any other business partners. We seem to work really well together, and she definitely keeps everything moving right along. But at the end of the day, I put my name on the business. It's mine, and I own it. I take responsibility for it, and anything that comes along with it, theoretically. So
well, congratulations. I mean, that's great. So you've been in business for 6 years now?
I believe so. Yes,
And
sir.
is that when you took the test 6 years ago?
No, I actually just passed the test last year. I just took it last year.
Hey,
I About
congratulations.
6 months prior, I said, "Yeah, I need this license," because I was hitting a roadblock. I was doing renovations, but I couldn't. You know, the amount of money we could get on one job was kind of getting capped out based off of not being able to pull the permits. I just got where I really just needed it. I needed it to be able to get to the next level. I was kind of plateaued out with what we were doing.
Yeah. And with that GC license, though, that you're gunning for, do you need to get a plumbing license now?
And
Oh, no.
so it's general contractors, building contractors. We're structural guys. We do the structural stuff. We still have to hire out no matter what, the plumbing,
Mm-hmm.
electrical, roofing,
Right.
HVAC, things like that. Those are specialty licenses.
Right.
Nothing stopping me from getting that license other than the experience and the want. Although over the years I've learned all those trades, and I'd say I'm, fairly proficient in all of them. It's nice now, I don't touch them, and that's fairly
All right.
nice to leave it with somebody else.
So, we always like to try to explore that decision-making process that, when you jump from working for someone into your own business. It sounds like yours, you kind of just started doing it anyways with different partners, et cetera. Um,
Sure.
I think your story is a little unique where, went to school and we're going to get into finance. Are you able to apply that, uh, that education to your
Absolutely.
business today?
Yeah, so the degree is in business and finance. I think I'm about 5 classes away from, and I actually just started back last semester. I just want to finish it. I'm not sure why, other than I just want to finish what I started. But within that is, I learned so much about economics and just the business world. It's important to learn the definitions and the reasoning of all the stuff, not just how we gather it from doing, but actually knowing and understanding, the lines, where the money comes from, where it goes, all the way from our hands to, everywhere with
Right.
taxes. Uh, you know, it's important to really understand how just finance works in general, but
I,
it
I,
definitely
I,
does.
I couldn't agree more. And that's something that I think most people in position, they lack. And I think it holds a lot of smaller businesses in the trades. It holds them back. You're kind of oftentimes not able to see the bigger picture and what the opportunities are if you're not able to quantify it and
Exactly.
utilize that.
So,
It's not
it's
just
it's
finance,
easy
but
it's easy to trick yourself and think that everything's great because, whenever you start out, or just any business starting out, you need work. So you get work. Is it good work though? Is it really worth your time? And just keeping busy, no matter how many guys you have working for you, just keeping everybody busy. If there's not bringing in profit, what's the purpose? And
right.
so, like I said, it's easy to get confused thinking everything is amazing because it might look great on the outside, but that's where Laura really helps me is just see that bottom line and because that's it, the black and white, the dollars and cents, the money. That's
Yep.
the reason we're here doing it. So
That's right.
it's, and over time we've got where we're just more and more and more strategic and we can just, we're more critical on things. We can't allow everything. We can't allow what we used to allow. And it just goes across the board with everything. But you definitely have to know where the money's at all times.
It sounds like you're able to apply a lot more analysis to create
Yes,
a
sir.
strategy, and it seems like a lot of other people in your shoes, they seem to follow the same strategy because it's just what's been there for a long time. But being able to break it apart and to look at the data, but you're saying so Laura helps you do that because she kind of is the
Absolutely.
operational.
Operations manager. She
Yeah,
does everything as far anything that, all the magical stuff that happens behind the scenes. That's what she does. And it's definitely critical. I think any business without somebody in charge of the finances, it's not going to last. It can't. And for
absolutely.
a business is an organism, and its purpose is to grow, not stay stagnant. Because if you're stagnant, you're eventually dying from there. So it's a nonstop, you know, give and take, figuring out where you gotta stop giving too much, put it over here, and it goes down to all the way down to the employees we have and everything else. It's nonstop. Got to stay on top of a lot of stuff.
What about your expectations? What expectations did you have? This is my personal favorite question. Maybe before you got started, what were your expectations and how were they met or how were they unmet?
I guess I didn't know I was gonna have to be a manager to this extent. Um, going through the trades earlier on, I was generally working with. I generally would partner up with somebody who kind of knew what was going on with that trade, and
Right.
that's how it went for the longest time. Now, um, we have to have people on the job site, and there's a never there's a never ending need for more people. There's always you know, the learning curve going on. And so I guess what I didn't quite expect the amount of just it's never as easy as just saying, "Hey, go do this." And it's just, and really when it comes down to with it being in my name, not a fictitious name, my
Right.
name. I take it personally, take it seriously. And, the reason customers keep calling back year after year, calling me, not another company, is because they know I'm personally involved. And so, trying to get people on board with my special ways of doing things, that's where there's a lot of unexpected stuff with that. It helps when we have people we got some really great folks right now who genuinely just know the stuff, know the trades. With what we do a lot of different trades all in the same day often,
Hmm.
and it's crucial to be fluent. But yeah, I don't know. I guess forever for growing up, I figure when I get my license, millions and millions of dollars will just start flowing in, and
Right.
it's been nothing short of a pure battle every single day, but it's a good battle.
I would say that unforeseen hurdle of switching into management is pretty common. I mean, that was my case as well. I think it's the hardest thing that I've had to do
I had
is
no idea.
manage people.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's and it's fairly simple when it's an owner operator or
Yep.
you have say you and one guy or maybe two and a helper or something, but you get more people involved and then you have, they're relying on you and you have to pay them no matter what. If you don't pay them, they're not coming back to work. And, and then you can't just pay them decent. You got to pay them damn good over
Right.
and over. And you got to do everything you can in between to keep them motivated, keep them happy, keep them, wanting to come back. And then, I always tell the new guys that they're always coming in for a job, but I say, don't look at this like a job. Look at this like it could be your career. Now, this could be a lifelong thing. How do you expect to ever get slightly ahead if you don't think long term like that?
That's great advice.
And also, I say, you're starting out at X amount of dollars. I mean, just imagine like this guy over here next to you. Look at all the knowledge he has. Gain some of that knowledge, he gains some more money, and it's very cut and dry. There's no
Right.
there's no time period to or minimum time requirements on this stuff. If you can get it, some people just grasp certain skills a lot faster than others.
Yep.
And that's the money. That's it. And that's why I've learned everything I did over the years, because I just thought it was dumb to be sitting at the house when I got to wait for a tile guy so I can do the trim, or the painter so I can do this or whatever. And it just over time made sense just to learn every single thing, really, within construction. And that's just part of it, part of staying proficient.
You mentioned having your name on the business and the customers and maintaining the customers. Tell us about your customer base. Where are they coming from? Who is your main customer?
So I would say a majority of our customers are just based off of word of mouth. Like I said, I've been in town forever. Although I've had primarily trade focused businesses over the years, I've still managed to do just a little bit of everything over time. And we have a bunch of great customers. We work primarily in the nicer parts of town, which honestly, if you're running a business, I mean, you have to know your audience. You have to know where you're working, and it just doesn't make sense to work in some places. It's we're here to make money. There's no other way, honestly.
And it's mostly, it's all residential. Am I wrong?
Primarily, I'd say a good 60%, 60-70% is residential. We service some nationwide businesses, some chains. We do some maintenance stuff for them. We do, we just do all kinds of stuff. It's, if they have money, we have time. That's the bottom line.
Well
And
put.
do you value those customers differently? I mean, that's a terrible way to ask that question, I guess. What I'm trying to get at is, the repeat business of commercial work, I've always found to be much more enticing than the residential that is here and then gone. And then they may call you back in 5-10 years.
It has the urgency, right? Anything commercial, they want you to jump on a little bit quicker, especially if it's maintenance related. However, for some reason, I take everything like it's urgent, like right now. And I don't like to stretch things out. I just try to hammer it out as quick as I can. If that means bringing in more people, making more phone calls, whatever I got to do. Often I'm in the field a good, at least 4 days a week, 4 solid days, whether they're scattered out or on Saturday or whatever it is. I'm in there a lot, but I think it's important to treat them all the same, because at the end of the day, I'm not really charging. So when it comes to charging based off of the what everyone charges in the area, or you charge off of what you just have to make. And so that's why I say, if they got the money to pay what we just have to make, then it's okay to be there. And
Right.
I mean, as long as they got the money, the urgency's there.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's the goal. That's the finish line. So once that's all in line, it's like, well, hey, let's get it. Let's finish this thing. We got to get to the next one. There's about a 10-second reprieve from the time we're walking out for the, carrying the broom out to the truck on our final sweep. We get in the truck, and then, right back to the next one. And
One deep breath, and that's it.
That's it.
Hey, tell us. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was going to say, I keep hearing this recurring theme of like finishing a job. And that must be like the builder in you, like you're finishing school because you have to do it. I like that mindset of when you're starting something, you finish it, and that's good to
Yes.
have someone in your business who does that, because there are ones that don't. Go ahead, Edgar.
Yeah,
I'm sure your
that's
customers
a really
appreciate
funny
that.
thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's a really funny thing, and even in the contractor manual, say 98, 99% is considered 100%, and I think some people take that a little liberally.
Yeah, right.
To me, it's not done until I go through literally with a magnifying glass. And, I'm the kind of person that will waste or burn up a whole nother day of time, half a day, a whole day, doing stuff that wasn't even on not even on the estimate, just because it just makes our job look better.
Right,
It
right.
just, I never want the customer to think we weren't there 100% or, just completely on top of their stuff.
Yeah, and that's
Good to hear.
in no small part because your name is on everything, and that's pretty cool to hear you talk about that.
I was just going to ask, just to give us an idea, how big is your crew, or are you subbing out, or you have your
Employees, subs.
yeah,
What we do
Laura
is
and you. So who's
we
with the
have a
company?
ton of different subcontractors. We have a bunch of guys that are in-house that work with us day in, day out, every day. We have, I think 6 or 7 right now. It often changes. And then we also have a handful of different subcontractors, the plumbers, electricians, roofers, AC guys. So it's not crazy to be writing payroll checks or, checks to 8, 10, 12 people every week. And, we're still very small, I'd say.
It sounds like you're getting there.
In the business world, anything under 100 is considered a small company. Any amount of less than 100 people, which it doesn't feel like it sometimes. And the money, you look at all the money in, money out, it doesn't necessarily seem small sometimes, but, in the grand scheme of things, we're very, very tiny still.
So can I ask what your expected revenue is, say, for 2025?
So like I said, this year I've put all the pieces together over the years, and this year we're coming out of the gates really good. We have a ton of stuff to do. It better be over a couple mil. I mean, it should
That's
be.
great.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'm shooting for 3 to 5 minimum.
So can I ask what 2024 looked like?
I honestly don't even quite know, because I checked it halfway through the year. I was trying to beat the previous revenue, which was very close to 1 million. And so I haven't checked it in a few months. I got so busy. I assume we're somewhere between the two.
Yeah, it's like I used to coach football, and as I was told when I was playing, I tell the kids that you don't look at the scoreboard until it's all over.
Right.
So you
Well,
stay focused on
and
the job at hand.
exactly.
Jobs.
And whenever I really started getting Laura to help a ton, she's in finance and does all kinds of finance stuff. She's just great with that stuff. And when she got involved, she pretty much just said, "Trevor, you do your job, I'll do my job," and it's been much better since then. And
Perfect.
it just the not having to look at stuff, just trusting her to do it,
Yeah.
trusting her information. Believe me, she's always on my butt about doing more and more. And, that's just part of growing.
Tell me this. So she's the one who's utilizing technology, software. I'm assuming that I know you guys are much more into the analysis than probably most companies. What do you use now to look at besides the accounting stuff, your income statement,
We
financials,
do
etc.?
tons of spreadsheets, and I think she uses like Excel for a lot of stuff.
Okay.
We have a handful of different apps that we use. We have a time clock app. We have the estimate invoice app. Then all of our different emails, and we have a ton, but generally it's kind of just rough going over previous, comparing it to more
Right.
recent.
So, and I know this conversation is almost all about you, but Swivl's business is field service software. That's why it's kind of pointed questions about this. But so what do you use now to do your invoices, estimates, scheduling, that kind of thing?
So as far as we use a program called Joist.
Okay.
Joist.
Yep. Familiar with it.
Yep.
And so I use that program since back before it was cool.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, I found it years and years and years ago, and somehow over time I found tons of other guys that are using it as well.
Yep.
My company, I like the green. I like green. Choice is green. I don't know. It just
It's funny, those little
Bitch.
things mean something.
yeah,
Even
it's
color.
silly, but it's been a good app.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll have to get you to take a look at Swivl at some point.
Yes,
But,
absolutely.
we'll talk about that later on. Tell them, well, all right.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about I'm cutting in on your space.
It's okay. We're a team here.
Goals. What are your goals then? So I know we heard one for 2025. So besides revenue goals, can we talk about what your expectations are for the next, so you did 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. I mean, what's your exit strategy if you have one?
Ultimately, I would like to, I consider myself an artist first, really, and then a carpenter, a contractor, all these other things. And so what I would really like to do is just design and build just really awesome houses, really awesome buildings, whether commercial or residential. It's just both. And I don't know if I need to wind up in architecture school or not. It's interesting because in Florida, you can, as long as you can get an engineer to sign off your plans, you can draw your plans, basically. So I like the idea of just designing some really cool stuff, working with engineers to help me make it happen. And I just want to build some stuff that you haven't really seen. That's my goal.
I like that.
I like
Stay
it.
in the Tallahassee area, kind of in that greater Tallahassee.
No, not at all. We work all over the North Florida area, South Georgia. We usually work 2 to 3 hours away for right now. However, I love all of Florida. I love being by the coast. Any of the coast really in Florida are great. So, eventually I'd like to probably get down towards Miami area, tossing back and forth the Jacksonville, trying to get over there a little more. Okay. And the bottom line is there's just more money over there in these larger cities, and also there's a higher chance of people wanting some pretty crazy extreme houses.
There is a lot of money out there, that's for sure.
See the fish where the fish are.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, we have covered a good amount of ground, but I really appreciated listening to about your journey building Murphy's Renovations.
Yes,
your insights have been inspiring, and I like to see that business side too, the application of it. That's kind of what I did as well, and it works. So I like to hear about someone that's learning on a constant basis and applying what they're learning to building something. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. But before we wrap things up, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners and viewers? Anything else that you would want this audience to take away? Perhaps some final advice for those who are looking to follow in your footsteps and jumping into starting their own renovations business or construction business?
I could say if you're looking to get started in construction or, well, hell, just any business, really, be prepared because it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and you got to make sure you have some good people on your side that can really help you whenever it starts getting tough and help you stay focused. And you just have to know you can't give up. There's just no reason to start if you ever think you would give up. It's just a never-ending push, and I'm not sure if you ever feel like you ever truly made it. When do you feel like you made it? Because you can always kind of go a little further. But the bottom line is if the business closes, it failed. So keep that in your mind and just keep going.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur. That is fantastic, Trevor.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your journey and insights with us today. We really do appreciate you taking your time to speak with us. Your story will definitely resonate with existing and aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me.
huge thank you to Trevor Murphy for sharing those valuable insights and his stories. It's great to see how much hard work, passion, and dedication that you put into building Murphy's Renovations and how it's paying off. And for all of you watching or listening, if you are in the greater Tallahassee, Florida region and you're in need of some home remodeling or renovations, make sure to reach out to Murphy's Renovations. You can find their contact information right here on the screen. And believe me, you can trust that you're working with a true, reliable expert in the field. Once again, thank you, Trevor, for being here with us on Swivl Sessions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening or watching. Swivl's field service software is everything you need to run your field service for free. Till next time, check us out at swivl.tech. That's SWIVL.tech. And that's a wrap.
Awesome.